The invitation popped up in my calendar on Thursday afternoon. Company happy hour, 5:30 p.m. at the Craft Pint. Almost immediately, people around the office started talking about it. Are you going tonight? I heard the first drink is on the company. Finally, I need one after this week. I smiled when Rachel from the desk across from mine looked over. You're coming, right? Yeah, I said. Of course. I tried to sound casual. Inside, I was already nervous. I had only been at the company for 3 weeks. Work itself was starting to feel manageable. Meetings were easy. Meetings had an agenda. They had a start time and an end time. Someone usually told me where to sit. And most importantly, I knew what my job was. Listen, take notes, answer questions, talk about the project. But happy hour? There was no agenda, no assigned seat, no presentation, no little box on my calendar explaining what I was supposed to do once I got there. It was just people standing around and talking. For some reason, that scared me much more than a meeting with 12 managers. At 5:20, people started closing their laptops. Someone near the window said, "Are we heading over?" Rachel grabbed her jacket. "You ready?" "Yep." I picked up my bag and followed everyone out. The bar was only a few minutes from the office. By the time we arrived, it was already loud, crowded, and warm. Music was playing. Glasses were clinking. People were laughing over each other. About 25 coworkers had already spread themselves around several high-top tables. Some were sitting, some were standing, some were gathered in little groups of 4 or 5, and somehow everyone seemed to know exactly where to go. Rachel spotted Daniel from sales almost immediately. "Oh my God, where have you been all week?" She walked toward him. I slowed down, and suddenly I was alone. I stood near the entrance holding my ginger ale. Then a surprisingly serious question entered my mind. Where do I stand? Literally. Where were my feet supposed to go? If I walked up to a group, was I interrupting? If I stood by myself, would I look lonely? If I stared at my phone, would I look rude? If I stayed near the door, would everyone think I was trying to leave? I looked around the room again. Every group seemed complete. 4 people here, 5 people there. Everyone laughing, everyone talking fast, everyone apparently born knowing how company happy hours worked. So I did what I usually did when I felt socially awkward. I took out my phone. There was nothing on it. No new messages, no interesting emails. Nothing. But I stared at it anyway. Then I realized that standing alone and pretending to text someone probably looked even more awkward. I'd put the phone away. That was when I noticed the food table. Perfect. Food gave me a reason to exist. I walked over, picked up a tiny plate, and began studying the snacks as if I were making an important business decision. There were wings, chips, vegetables, some kind of dip, little sliders. I wasn't even hungry, but suddenly I became extremely interested in carrots. I picked one up, put it on my plate, then another. For about 5 minutes, I became the woman who was very serious about vegetables. The strange thing was that I understood the English around me. I could hear people saying things like, "No way! You're kidding?" That was brutal. I'm so done with this week. I knew all those words, but I still couldn't figure out how to enter the conversation. That was when I realized something. There was the English I used in meetings, and then there was this, social English. People were joking, interrupting each other, telling stories I knew nothing about, using slang, reacting with expressions like, "That's wild," "Seriously good for you," "No chance." I understood the language. What I didn't understand were the invisible rules. It felt like watching a fast tennis match. The ball kept flying back and forth, and I was standing outside the court without a racket. Then someone walked up beside me. "Hey, Emily." I turned around. It was Sarah from marketing. "Hey. Having fun?" She looked at my plate, then at me, then back at the plate. I laughed. "Absolutely. I've developed a very close relationship with these carrots." Sarah laughed. "Good choice." For some reason, that made me relax a little. I took a breath. Then I decided to tell the truth. "Honestly, I never know what to do with these things." "What do you mean?" I lowered my voice slightly. "Like, how do you join a group without feeling like you're interrupting them?" Sarah looked around the room. Then she smiled. "Oh," she paused. "You think everyone else knows?" I looked at her. "Don't they?" She laughed. "No. Some people are just better at pretending." That made me laugh too. Then Sarah pointed toward a group standing near the window. "Okay, look at that group. There were 4 people talking together. See how they're standing? I looked more carefully. 3 of them were facing each other, but they weren't standing in a tight circle. There was a gap on one side. Yeah, that's the easiest kind of group to join. Why? Because they've left the circle open. I looked again. She was right. It was almost a half circle facing the room. Sarah pointed toward another group near the wall. Now look at those guys. They were standing much closer together. Everyone was facing inward. That group is harder to enter, she said. It's not impossible, but they look like they're in the middle of something. I had never thought about it before. Sarah smiled. Body language tells you a lot, so I should look for an open circle. Exactly. That sounded almost too simple. Then I asked, but what do I actually say? You really don't need anything clever. She thought for a second. You can just walk up and say, mind if I join you guys? Sai repeated it quietly. Mind if I join you guys? Perfect. And then what? Sarah shrugged. Listen. That's it. That's it. She smiled. If there's a pause, ask something easy. Try, how's your week going? Or ask, any plans for the weekend? And she added, and if they're already laughing when you walk over, just say, what did I miss? I laughed. Really? Really? She took a sip of her drink. Small talk isn't about saying something brilliant, Emily. Half the battle is just showing up. Then she nodded toward the group near the window. Come on. My stomach tightened. Right now? Right now? We walked over together. Sarah smiled at the group. Hey, mind if Emily and I join you? Chris from accounting immediately moved slightly to the side. Of course. That tiny movement surprised me. He had physically created a space for us. I stepped into it. Suddenly, I was standing inside the circle instead of outside it. They were talking about weekend plans. Chris said, my parents are visiting, so I'll probably spend Saturday pretending my apartment is always clean. Everyone laughed. Rachel said, you have exactly 2 days to hide everything in your bedroom. That is currently the plan. Then a woman beside me turned toward me. How about you, Emily? Anything fun planned this weekend? Normally, I would have said, not really. 2 words. Conversation over. But this time I tried something different. I'm thinking about checking out the farmer's market downtown. I've never been. Her face immediately changed. Oh, you should. I go all the time. Really? Yeah. Just go early. It gets crazy around noon. Chris nodded. And there's this bakery there with amazing cinnamon rolls. Rachel looked at him. You recommend that bakery to literally everyone, because I care about people. Everyone laughed. I did too. Then I asked Chris, what do you usually get there? And suddenly, I was having a conversation. Nothing impressive. Nothing brilliant. I hadn't used any difficult vocabulary. Nobody applauded my grammar. I had simply asked a normal question, and the conversation kept moving. A few minutes later, someone mentioned taking a road trip. I asked, oh nice, where are you driving to? Someone complained about how busy the week had been. I said, yeah, it's been a long one. Has it always been this busy? That led to another conversation. I slowly started to understand what Sarah meant. I didn't need to create the conversation from nothing. I could listen for something interesting and respond to it. The pressure I had been putting on myself started to disappear. Then something else happened. The group changed. Rachel went to get another drink. Chris saw someone he knew across the room. 2 other people started talking about a project I wasn't involved in. Suddenly, I was standing next to Jason from operations. Neither of us said anything for a few seconds. Old me would have panicked. New me decided to try. How's your week going? Jason laughed. Honestly, I'm glad it's almost over. Long week? Very. He looked at me. You're new, right? 3 weeks? Oh, wow. So you're still in the stage where everyone asks, how's everything going? I laughed. Every day. And you have to say, great, even though you still don't know where half the meeting rooms are. Yes, that immediately gave us something to talk about. Jason had joined the company the year before. He told me he once walked into the wrong conference room and sat through the first 3 minutes of somebody else's meeting because he was too embarrassed to leave. I laughed. What did you do? I finally said, I'm starting to think I'm in the wrong meeting. What happened? They said, we were starting to think that too. I laughed so hard that some of my nervousness finally disappeared. A little later, Jason asked, are you getting a drink? Oh, I'm good with this. I held up my ginger ale. You don't drink. Sometimes. I just don't really feel like it tonight. Fair enough. And that was it. No strange look, no explanation, no pressure. That was another thing I had worried about for no reason. Happy hour didn't mean everyone had to drink alcohol. Some people had beer, some had cocktails, some had soda, some had sparkling water. Nobody cared. About 20 minutes later, I walked over to get another ginger ale. When I turned around, I saw a group near the bar laughing. I recognized one person from my team. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I noticed something. Their circle was open. I could almost hear Sarah's voice. "You don't need anything clever." I walked over. "Hey, mind if I join you guys?" "Yeah, of course." Someone moved over. As I stepped in, another guy was finishing his story. Everyone laughed. I smiled. "What did I miss?" He pointed at another coworker. Tom just admitted he accidentally sent his mom a message that was supposed to go to his girlfriend. I looked at Tom. "Oh no." Tom covered his face. "It gets worse." And just like that, I was in another conversation. No one had asked for my resume. No one had tested my vocabulary. I had just stepped into an open space and said 6 words. Later that evening, I noticed a woman standing alone near the end of the bar. Her name was Priya. I had seen her around the office but had never talked to her. She was holding a drink with both hands, and she was looking at her phone. I recognized that pose immediately. That had been me 45 minutes earlier. Part of me wanted to stay where I was, but another part remembered how relieved I had felt when Sarah came over. So I walked toward her. "Hey, Priya, right?" She looked up. Her face immediately relaxed. "Yeah, Emily." "Yup, hi." I stood beside her. "Is this your first company happy hour too?" She laughed. "Yes." "Is it that obvious?" "No." I smiled. "It's mine too." She looked around the room. "I honestly have no idea where I'm supposed to stand." I burst out laughing. "Okay, you're going to think I'm joking, but that was literally my first thought when I walked in." "Really? Really?" I spent the first 5 minutes pretending to be fascinated by carrots. She laughed. "That actually makes me feel so much better." Then I pointed toward a group nearby. "See that group?" "Yeah." "See the space in their circle?" She looked. "Yeah." "Apparently that's the secret." "What secret?" "Open circle." I smiled. "Come on, I'll show you." I couldn't believe those words were coming out of my mouth. Less than an hour ago, I had been hiding behind the snack table. Now I was helping someone else join a conversation. We walked over together. I caught someone's eye. "Mind if we join you guys?" Of course. They made room. Priya looked at me and smiled, and I suddenly understood something. Confidence hadn't arrived all at once. I hadn't suddenly become an outgoing person. I had simply learned what to do next. Around 7, people slowly started heading home. I had originally planned to stay for 20 minutes. I had been there for almost an hour and a half. Rachel found me near the door. "You survived." "Barely." She smiled. "Did you have fun?" I looked around the room. "Actually, yeah." "See? I spent the first 10 minutes wondering where I was supposed to put my feet." Rachel laughed. "That sounds about right." I put on my jacket and stepped outside. The evening air felt cool after the crowded bar. As I walked home, I thought about how nervous I had been. I had imagined everyone else would be confident. Funny, socially perfect. They weren't. Some people talked a lot. Some barely talked. Some stayed for 2 hours. Some left after 20 minutes. Some drank beer. Some drank soda. Some moved easily between groups. Others stood quietly and waited for someone to say hello. Real conversations weren't smooth either. People interrupted each other. They forgot what they were saying. They missed jokes. They said things like, "Sorry, go ahead," or "Wait, what were we talking about?" or "I completely lost my train of thought." That night taught me something I had never learned from an English textbook. Speaking English at work isn't only about knowing what to say in a meeting. Sometimes it's about understanding the little social signals nobody explains. An open circle, a smile, eye contact, a space someone makes for you. And sometimes all you need are a few simple words. "Mind if I join you guys? How's your week going? What did I miss?" The next month, the company had another happy hour. When I walked into the bar, I still felt a little nervous. But this time, I didn't take out my phone. I didn't hide beside the food table. I looked around. Near the window, I saw Chris and a few other coworkers talking. Their circle was open. Chris noticed me. He smiled and moved slightly to the side. There was a space waiting for me. I walked over. "Hey guys, mind if I join you?" "Of course." And just like that, I finally knew where to stand. Not because someone had given me a rulebook, not because my English had suddenly become perfect, but because I had learned that social English wasn't a test I had to pass. I didn't have to be the funniest person in the room. I didn't have to talk to everyone. I didn't need perfect grammar or clever stories. Sometimes I just needed to walk over, smile, and give the conversation a chance, and if everything else failed, there were always the carrots. If stories like this help you understand the English people actually use in real life, subscribe to FluentTrail English and keep learning with me. We'll practice real conversations, awkward moments, and the little expressions that textbooks often leave out. I'll see you in the next story.